Black-Eyed Kids in Louisiana. It was about 3 years ago, November 2012, when I was working at a small gas station in northeast Louisiana. We were the only small shop and 24-hour service station in miles just off the highway. I worked the night shift. I loved it. The sharing of stories and the traveling customers. That is where the rare customers showed up. It must have been around 3 a.m. I was cleaning the floors and locking the beer coolers when suddenly the lights went out. I pulled out my cell and used it as a guiding light until I made it back to our counter where I kicked on the gas generator. It lit the parking lot, the bath, and the hall leading to the register. When I looked outside, I could just make out the movement of the trees across the street, but otherwise it was pitch black. I turned on the radio and started listening to a local station with its night owl DJ commenting on the heavy winds and cracking jokes between songs. Suddenly, I saw some figures in the dark. I could just make them out. They seemed to be a group of kids on bikes. There were 3 of them. 2 of them dropped their bikes and made their way to the door where they just stood there staring at me. I just stared back for a moment, waiting for them to come in. They never did. I moved around the counter and opened the door. "What's up, guys? Out kinda late, aren't you?" I asked them, expecting them to come in. "Can we use your phone?" one asked. Their heads tilted kinda low. I felt a little worried as I pulled my cell from my pocket and offered it to her. "Sure." She looked at me and then I saw her eyes. They were solid black, almost like ink-filled orbs. "No, I need the real one," she said. Her face twisted into an angry snarl. I pulled the door closed and flipped the lock. No, ma'am, you go home and get your mom's phone." They stared at me through the door for a minute longer before turning away and biking off. The next day, I had my boss check the cameras to get the pictures of the creepy kids, but the cameras had been off the whole time. Now, the cameras run off the generator instead of the hall lights. I never saw the kids again. I literally hate reading stories about Black-Eyed Kids because this literally freaks me out. The very first encounter of Black-Eyed Kids was here in Texas, so I wouldn't put it past them to be in Louisiana. Louisiana, you can keep them? Thank you. I live in a big city and it's 11:52 here as I type this. I had just got home from The Conjuring. Scary shit, I'm telling ya. I was lurking on R Creepy and heard a knock on the door. Oh my gosh. As I approached the door, I felt pure terror. The feeling you get when you feel like death is imminent or you're facing your biggest fear. When I opened the door, I was shaking madly. I was staring into the face of a 6'3" teenage girl. She was still 4 inches shorter than me, but it felt like I was about to faint. She asked if she could enter the premises because her mom had left town and she lost her keys. She claimed she needed a couch to sleep on and it was cold. I blinked and screamed bloody murder, slamming the door in her face. I ran to my room and grabbed my revolver. Yeah, illegal, I know. Oh, okay. And I sat in the recliner facing the door until I dozed off. When I woke up, I looked outside and she was gone, but the word soon was scratched weakly into my door. Why did I just get chills? Oh my god. Time to move out. I think I'm gonna take a little break from reading Black-Eyed children's stories. Thank you.
It's Out of This World Wednesday, and tonight we're going to read a Reddit no-sleep story called I Know Where Black-Eyed Children Come From. This one is a little long, so y'all get comfortable. Maybe turn a light on. It's going to be creepy. Just a warning beforehand. At the top here it says, think about it before continuing. They say Black-Eyed Kids only come if you know about them. With that being said, let's begin. When I was a kid, my little brother and I visited my grandparents' house in Tahlequah, Oklahoma every summer. It was a pretty boring town. As the capital of the Cherokee Nation, most recreational activities were related to the culture and history of the Cherokees. The last summer we spent there, I was 11, that age between wanting so badly to be seen as a teenager but still finding enjoyment in brat stalls. My brother was 8 and wouldn't settle down unless he had his Nintendo DS. I didn't dread visiting my grandparents like many children do. Other than the cultural shock that came from leaving our home in LA to the relatively small Oklahoma town, I loved spending time with my grandparents, and so did my brother. They spoiled us with toys and ice cream. On a Thursday afternoon, my little brother and I were playing at the elementary school across the street from my grandparents' house. If you've ever been to Oklahoma, you probably know how quickly the weather can change. It's not uncommon for it to snow one day and be in the 70s the next day. This day went from sunny to cloudy extremely quick. It didn't begin raining or lightning, so my brother and I continued to play, but these weren't normal clouds. They looked heavier and thicker. They were almost black. I'm still not sure if the clouds were some sort of warning for what was about to happen, or I'm just trying to connect things. A girl who was probably 9 or 10 showed up at some point. She didn't have parents with her, but it was a fairly safe town and not uncommon for kids to walk around. She introduced herself as Allie. She was blonde and blue-eyed, but began enlightening us with old Cherokee ghost tales. With Tahlequah being the capital of the Cherokee Nation, many urban legends in other towns are actually true in Tahlequah. Most people's great-great-grandmas really were Cherokees, and the school playground we were currently playing on really had once been an Indian burial ground. She told us one particular grotesque story about the deer lady, who was a heartbroken woman that went insane and cut her legs off and stitched a deer's legs on her torso in place. Her final story inspired what we thought would be a fun adventure. She told us a chief's 15-year-old daughter had been brutally murdered by her white husband on their anniversary for flirting with another man. They buried her, and out of respect, never removed her gravestone when the school was built. Allie told us it would take a bit of maneuvering, but there was a panel that could be removed and we could crawl underneath the skull and see the gravestone. We were all in shape, so we began our adventure. To our disappointment, the panel had been screwed shut and it began to rain. My brother and I decided to go home. Allie, however, insisted that there had to be another way in. I tried to tell her that her parents would probably be worried and that it would be best for her to go home too, but she was determined to find a way in. My brother and I went into my grandparents' house and changed into some dry clothes, drank Kool-Aid, and watched TV. While my brother and grandparents were watching The Fairly Odd Parents, I noticed I could still see Allie, drenched in rain, trying to find a way underneath the school from the living room window. Eventually, she did. I watched her crawl in, but I never saw her crawl out. We sat through an entire episode of The Fairly Odd Parents and a half an episode of Drake and Josh, so it had to have been 45 minutes. That night, I had trouble sleeping. I told myself she had to have come out a different way, or maybe she came out when I wasn't looking and finally drifted off. The next morning, I woke up refreshed. I was certain Allie had found a way out. My grandparents took us to the carnival and then to Brahms, the local ice cream shop. It was 6 o'clock in the evening when we got home, and my grandma began cooking supper while my grandpa took a nap. My brother and I were kids, though, and still had lots of energy left. So we went across the street to play some more, and our grandma told us she would call us when supper was ready. I told my little brother that I'd seen Allie go underneath the school, and I asked him if he was up for an adventure. He agreed, and I went to the panel that I saw Allie loosen. I loosened and crawled underneath the school, and my brother followed. The remaining daylight flooded into the basement along with us, providing us with just enough light to see things directly in front of us. The ground was cold, wet dirt, and there were many pipes and old basketballs to crawl around. I immediately spotted 8 to 10 headstones, though. The first one was directly to the right of my brother and I, but the name was too faded to read. I was feeling kind of creeped out that Allie had been right, and we were crawling over a bunch of dead bodies. I probably would have left, but my brother didn't seem afraid at all, and I wanted to seem braver than him. So I crawled to the next stone. This one read Andrew Cummings and had a birthday of 1890 and a death date of 1902. There was one to the left of it that read Allison Cummings and had a birthday of 1893 and a death date of 1902 also. This freaked me out even more and made me think of Allie, who had the same name and looked about the same age as the dead girl several feet below me. My brother suddenly shouted, "Look, something in the corner just moved." Before I could tell him that we should leave immediately, he shoved me out of the way and began crawling incredibly fast to the corner furthest from us. I could clearly see a couple of large figures moving, but couldn't make out much else. "They're probably just dogs. Let's go," I told him. But as he crawled, I crawled right behind him, getting closer and closer to the larger figures that began to look more and more like silhouettes of 3 people sitting against a wall, all with their knees to their chests. When they came into clear view, my brother turned around and crawled underneath me. I held him close to my chest. We were both terrified. The first girl was clearly Allie, except she didn't look as lively as she had looked yesterday. She wasn't smiling and her hair was stringy. Next to her was a boy who looked close in age to me and had no hair at all. He wasn't smiling either. Then there was a girl who looked more normal than Allie or the boy. Her skin was dark and her hair was so long it bunched up at the ground. She looked like she was about 16, but her facial expression was the scariest. It was one of absolute despair. The scariest part about all of them, though, was their eyes. I could see my brother's eyes glowing, but none of their eyes glowed. It didn't even really look like they had eyes, just pits of darkness. Allie smiled and said, "Thank God you guys came." The other 2 laughed. "Yeah, well, we're going to be leaving now," I said, trying my hardest to sound casual and not scared. All 3 laughed, and the other girl spoke up. "No, you're not." Her voice had a confidence that mine didn't. I pushed my brother in the direction we came in, and he began quickly crawling away. I heard my grandma calling out to us and called out to her to help us. All 3 of them suddenly stopped laughing. Allie suddenly looked scared and said, "Leave right now and never tell us so you saw us. You got lucky." We didn't have to be told twice and quickly crawled out. At dinner that night, my brother and I chalked up our silence to it having been a long day and us being tired. We never played at the playground across the street again and rarely talked about the incident. 5 months after we left, my grandparents were murdered in their own home. A neighbor had said she had seen my grandma let 3 children into their home the day of the murder. A bald boy, a blonde girl, and a dark-haired girl. Cops were never able to find any leads, and the case was eventually closed. Neither my brother nor I plan to visit Tahlequah or even Oklahoma ever again, but I know that doesn't matter. I'm certain that one day they'll show up on my step too. I know I'll tell them to go away, and I can only hope that will be enough. That was Out of This World Wednesday. Last week was Demon Aliens? Something demonic in space, anyways. And this week was Black-Eyed Children. Next week, you just never know. Maybe do mermaids. Maybe do flesh pedestrians, duendes. If y'all have any crazy, spooky, wild, or even just like stalker stories, y'all go ahead and submit them to the email in my bio. On Fridays, I'm going to be reading follower stories as soon as I get some submitted. But if you come back tomorrow, it's going to be Thirsty Thursdays, which is our stalker story night. So if you're interested in stuff like this, y'all go ahead and give me a follow. In the meantime, hope y'all come back tomorrow. I hope y'all enjoyed that, and I hope you have a good night.
Did you know that the legend of the Black-Eyed Children started after multiple people reported seeing little girls with completely black eyes in Cannock Chase, which is the area where serial unaliver Raymond Morris abducted several of his victims? An 18-year-old woman made the first report in 1982 when she was hanging out in Cannock Chase with some friends, partying and having a good time, when she said she heard a little girl screaming for help. She said she saw a little girl around 6 to 8 years old running toward the woods screaming, "Help, mommy, help." She chased after her but eventually lost her as she got to the woods. The police were called, but they never found the little girl. When Raymond Morris passed away in 2014, there was a rash of sighting of black-eyed girls in the area. One man reported, "On Saturday the 13th of September, my wife and I were walking through Cannock Chase with our dog. Once we had entered the woodland and the road was no longer visible, we started to hear the giggling noise of a little girl. To our amazement, a child no taller than 1 meter in height appeared as if out of nowhere further up the path in front of us. We stopped dead in our tracks after noticing her eyes had no color. Her head was tilted to the side in much the same way it would appear if she had been hung. She stared at us for a few minutes before running away into a densely grouped area of trees. My wife wanted to follow her, but I was having none of it." Another woman recalled, "Around 2 months ago, my daughter and I were walking through the area when we heard the screams of a young child. I couldn't tell if it was a boy or a girl, but they definitely seemed in distress and sounded very close to us, so we instantly started running toward the noise. We couldn't find the child anywhere, and so stopped to catch our breath. That's when I turned around and saw a girl stood behind me, no more than 10 years old, with her hands over her eyes like she was waiting for a birthday cake. I asked her if she was okay, and if she had been the one screaming. Then she put her arms down by her side and opened her eyes, which is when I saw they were completely black, no iris, no white, nothing. I jumped back and grabbed my daughter, and when I looked again, the child was gone. It was strange, really. I knew something was going to happen even before it did. I just had a weird feeling." And yet another mother was looking through the photos of her children in Cannock Chase in 2014 when she spotted the, quote, ghostly figure of a child in a Victorian dress standing to the left of a tree where her children were climbing. We were on a family walk one afternoon and the kids decided to climb a tree. I stopped to take a photo, but it wasn't until I got home that I spotted a child's face looking back at me. Plenty of other people claim to have caught footage or photos of what they all say are little girls under the age of 10 with completely black eyes. So what do you think? Are these the victims of Raymond Morris doomed to haunt these woods forever?
I got a spooky story submission by this girl who said that she was haunted in Appalachia by the opposite of a black-eyed child. I can promise you that this is worse than a black-eyed child. I am telling a longer version of the story tonight, so please put 2 and 2 together. And tonight's submitter did not tell me whether I could use her real name or not, so we are going to call her Kendra. So Kendra is a 24-year-old female that lives in North Carolina currently, but from the year she was born to the year she was 13 years old, she moved back and forth from Ohio to West Virginia. Now, her father's family lived in West Virginia, and her mother's family lived in Ohio. It's important to note that her and her mother are gifted, so this was not in her imagination. In the email, she says that you would assume that most of her experience would be in Appalachia, but they actually started in Ohio. Now, when Kendra was 4 years old, she moved into a 2-story townhouse in Ohio. Now, Kendra wasn't typically afraid of the dark, but in this townhouse, she was afraid of the dark. She used to make her father read stories to her until she fell asleep. She demanded it. Now, having her father do this worked for a while, but her parents did not want her to get used to having an adult with her to sleep in the room to have to go to sleep at night. So instead, they decided to get her a nightlight, and this worked for a while, but she started to see something that would absolutely terrify terrify her. Every night after her parents would go to bed, she would wake up and she would look in the hallway, and there would be this woman, this sopping wet woman with long dark hair covering her face, standing in the hallway just sobbing her eyes out. She never spoke to her or even looked up at her, but even at a very young age, she knew that there was something wrong with this situation. She thought in her head, did her parents let her in? Who let her in? Why was she crying? Why was she crying so loudly? And how was this not waking her parents up? These questions plagued her every night, and she would ask her parents about it, but she would get the same response every single time. It's a nightmare. In her parents' room, there was this old vanity. She eventually determined that the closer she got to it, the more scared she was of it. Well, in this vanity is where her mom kept her candy gum, and one day she really wanted to try a piece of that candy gum, so she decided that she was going to go upstairs while her mom was sleeping, and she was going to steal a piece of her candy gum from her vanity. She swears to God she saw the woman who she would previously see roaming in the halls, sitting inside of the mirror, staring at her. She screamed and started crying, quickly alerting her mother, who was asleep, but ran into the room, grabbed a blanket, and threw a blanket over the mirror. Her mom completely covered the mirror with this blanket and promptly explained to her she is never to go into her room ever alone. The rest of her time in that house was a blur. She remembers going to visit her grandparents very often with her mother because her mother was just trying to get out of that house until they moved. Later in life, her mother independently told her that she was seeing the exact same things that Kendra was seeing in that house, and actually at one point had her father get rid of the vanity before they moved because she knew that whatever this was attached to the vanity. When she was 6 years old, she moved to West Virginia for the second time, and they lived in a house that was 2 houses down from her grandparents. The house was built in the 30s, and it showed from the super thin glass and the no central air or heat. Beyond that, the people who lived there before them were definitely hoarders, and they also left some very curious renovations in the house. Interesting things were found in the house, like a boarded up fireplace and padlocks found on the outside of bedroom doors, light switches too far up for any child to reach, and a crawl space. Crawl space was the worst. To get to it, you had to go around the back of the house. Before moving in, her father took a crowbar to a padlock on an old wooden half door. There was no floor but dirt, and it smelled of mildew. Now you're probably thinking, well, that's what a crawl space is, and you would be correct. But it was what her parents found inside that was the last straw for them and resulted in them calling the cops on the previous tenants. The previous owners had a lot of kids, more kids than they could handle. They had 6. But it wasn't only the kids, it was 2 parents and 2 grandparents that lived in that 2-bedroom hoarder house. They thought it would be a great idea to make that crawl space a bedroom for their youngest boy, who was 6 years old. Now, this child was most likely locked in there. It was as soon as her parents realized what they were looking at that they had her go to her grandparents' house and play, and they called the cops so that they could document what they had found. Well, after this, they eventually got the house livable, so they moved into the house. She actually got the room where the padlock was on it and the light switch was too tall for her to reach. Immediately after moving in, she began to have nightmares that she was being stalked or chased. It was not long after this that she decided that she was going to start going to church with her grandmother, who was a devout Southern Baptist. Not only was this one of the only activities that was around for her, but she also hoped and prayed that this would make the experiences that she was experiencing stop. It didn't. Every night, she would say her prayers, sing hymns, and read the Bible. She even slept with rosaries that her Catholic grandmother gave her, but this didn't stop him. She would be in bed, and like clockwork, the knob of her closet door would slowly fall out. It was solid metal, so it would still make a loud clanking noise as it dragged on the carpet. She would lay there, completely still, yet her eyes fixed on the door. The door was hard to open, considering the carpet in front of it was over its threshold, but it would open. Inside would be a boy. She vividly remembers him. His head was too large for his body. His hair was short, yet he had greasy bangs. In fact, every part of him was greasy. He stayed huddled in a ball, but then turned to look at her. And oh my God, those eyes. His eyes were triple the size of what they should be, and while every other part of him was black, his eyes were blinding white. His facial expression, it wasn't a malice, but yet a cry for help, it seemed. She remembers feeling so terrified she couldn't move. The fear she felt wasn't a normal, I'm seeing ghost fear. But it was like the boy was putting or projecting intense fear, grief, and sadness into her. It's like she knew they weren't her feelings, but yet she felt them so deeply. This was no nightmare or sleep paralysis. Multiple times she would try to sit up in her bed to examine him further or try to get the courage to run out of her room. She would beg with tears in her eyes not to sleep in her room. She would tell her mother multiple times, and her mother was actually getting concerned about her mental health or concerned that this was actually a thing. One night she was allowed to sleep at her grandparents' house, and her mother slept in that room, and that's when she saw him. She contacted her godparents, which came to the house with a priest that they had known to bless their house. After that, things got worse, like physical things started happening, like books falling off the shelves and her waking up with scratches and bruises. They couldn't take it anymore. Finally, they moved in with her grandparents in Ohio until they could find a new apartment and get away from that house. Years later, her mother actually admitted that she saw everything that she had seen from the beginning too, but she just didn't want to admit it because she didn't want to scare her. Once she got away from it, it doesn't torment her like it used to. She can sleep well without having to have a special routine. Sometimes She swears if she's in West Virginia, she can feel him right beside her in any closet door to this day. So what do you guys think about the story? First of all, the whole situation with like the crawl space being a bedroom for a 6-year-old and the padlocks on the outside of the bedroom doors and the light switches breaks my heart, because you know damn well those kids were being abused. Now here's my thoughts on it. I think maybe it was a manifestation from the previous tenants, just from all of the negative energy and everything that went on in the house prior, that this little boy manifested. Because I don't think that the little boy that was in the house prior was unalived. I just think that this was like a manifestation of the pure evil that was going on. What do you guys think? And the fact that she was feeling all of his feelings and all that negativity and the sadness and just consumed her is also so sad. The lady who was sobbing in the hallway, I have no idea what that was, but that was terrifying. So just drop all your thoughts, opinions, everything in the comments, because I'm sure she'll be seeing all of them and she might even respond to them. But with that being said, I am now going to do my favorite part, which is the shout outs.
14 years ago, I started investigating some cases of the black-eyed children here in central Illinois. And it's like out of nowhere, we started to get reports of people seeing these young kids from like age 9 to 14 with strange eyes, and they seemed almost terrifying and threatening. And what's interesting is that none of these people that reported these children had any connection to each other. They didn't know that other people were seeing this. I was the only one at the time who knew of these stories. But the creepiest of all the encounters by far was this story out of Mason City. There was a couple, a husband and a wife. They were driving from Mason City to Pekin one morning, and it was 3 a.m. It was cold, it was snowy, and they were on their way to go to work in Pekin. Now, as they're driving down this rural road that is nothing but just cornfields and woods, the car shuts off. And so the husband manages to veer over onto the shoulder. And he thinks, okay, maybe it's something with the battery, one of the terminals. So he gets out of the car and he goes around to the front of the hood and pops the hood and starts messing with the terminals on the battery. He said all of a sudden he got just this dreadful feeling inside of him, and his stomach just sank. And when he turns to his right, he sees these 3 kids standing there, around 12 to 13 years old. And they're wearing black hoodies, black pants, black shoes, and they have their hoods up, covering, most of their face. And they said to him, "Can you give us a ride?" And he's like, obviously you can see, I'm broke down. I'm not going anywhere. They said, "Go to your car and try and start it." And he said the 2 kids in the back, they were kind of echoing what the person up front said. And they're like, go. And he felt kind of creeped out at this point. He was like, yeah, I'm going to get back in the car anyways. So he goes and sits in the car. And he turns the key in the ignition, and the car starts right up. He turns to his left, and out the window are these 3 kids standing there. And he rolls down his window, and it was like, thank you, I got the car started, but I'm thinking about it. I got my wife here. It's 3 a.m. I don't feel comfortable giving you guys a ride anywhere, but I have my cell phone. I can call someone to come pick you up. And they said, no, you have to give us a ride. And he said, look, I told you I'm not going to give you a ride. They said, you don't understand. We can't come inside unless you invite us. And he thought, okay, that's weird, but look, I'm not giving you a ride. You need to get away from the car. And right at that moment, this kid in front steps forward, and that's when he could see his face. And he realizes this kid has solid black eyes. And he said the best way to describe him was that of a rabbit's eyes. And instantly he rolls up his window, and this makes these kids angry, and they start banging on the car, banging on the windows, and they're screaming, and they're just, in sort of like this rage. And this guy's like, what do I do? Do I drive off and risk like running one of them over? But right at that moment, another car happens to come down the highway, and they stop, and it's a guy, and he says, are you all right? Is everything okay? And they're like, we had some car trouble, but we got the car started. But there's these kids out here, and they were kind of harassing us. So the guy's like, hold on a second. He gets out of his truck and grabs a flashlight, and the husband and this guy start looking for the children. Except there's nothing but cornfields and they can't see these kids anywhere. So he thinks, oh, maybe let's look in the snow, for footprints. We can see which direction they went. Except when they go to the car and around the hood, they find only one set of footprints. And instantly the husband knew that what he had encountered was not human. They made it home that night, but the husband said he could not sleep for weeks because those eyes were just kind of burned into his memory, and that's all he could think about.
Was this a black-eyed kid in Mexico, or is it something completely different? This guy says the story he's about to share is a story that he's heard his grandfather share with a lot of people throughout the years. He explains how the story has never changed, it's always remained the same, so he definitely believes what his grandfather said. When his grandfather was little, they lived in a ranch basically far away from the city. This was a large family, so the grandfather was the youngest out of a lot of siblings, and mom and dad, of course. Being that the family was huge and the grandfather wouldn't get a lot of attention, he would end up doing really bad things to his siblings, including the mom. He would prank them, he would just do things that weren't even funny, so he was always getting into trouble. He got into so much trouble that they started punishing him by making him take the goats up to the mountain so that they can go and eat. Side note, this is exactly how they would punish my stepdad too. And I've been to those mountain places. They're fucking scary. I almost died because I fell and I kept rolling down the fucking hill. I don't know how I held onto a branch and didn't fall off that damn cliff. But anyway, this is not my story. The grandfather really hated that punishment, so the entire way up the mountain he would be cussing, he would be doing really bad things, including kicking the goats because he didn't want to do it. So he says that in one of these days where he got punished and he had to go and take the goats up to the mountains, he came up the mountain and onto this clearing. There, he saw this really big rock and decided that he was gonna sit on it just to get some rest. So he'd been sitting on that rock for a while, and then out of nowhere, the goats started acting strange. They were running, they were acting out. It was almost as if they were scared or in defensive mode. That was also the moment where he felt almost as if something or someone was watching him. He also says that he would hear leaves ruffling, almost as if somebody was there. He thought that maybe it was an animal, like a coyote or something, but that was also the moment where he heard someone calling his name. He was looking around and didn't see anything, and it was only until he saw this really big bush that had some nopales around it where he saw a little boy who was around 5 or 6 years old. So he saw the little boy and started walking towards him, and when he got a little closer, he noticed that the little boy was naked, and that's when he started to worry because he's like, oh my gosh, is something wrong? What if this little boy got lost up here in the mountain? So he decided he was gonna walk towards the boy a little bit more, but then he stopped altogether, and that was because of what he saw. He saw that little boy's eyes were completely black. There was no white in them. Meanwhile, the goats had not calmed down. They were still running, being scared, and then ended up behind the grandfather. They just stood behind him. And the grandfather, he just stood very still. He was still trying to think about what exactly he was looking at. Was this a kid? Why is he naked? Why are his eyes completely black? And then that little boy picked up his hand and went like this to the grandfather for him to get closer to him. Bitch, I would start rolling down that hill again and not stop myself. The grandfather was not about to get close to him, so he decided to ignore his little come close to me. And that was also in the moment where that little kid, in a really raspy, deep voice, tells him, come closer. In that moment, the grandfather was like, hell no, I am not getting close to this thing. He decided to start running down that path that he had just came up from, and even the goats were running with him. The grandfather says that he did not have the courage to even look back and see if that little boy was chasing him until he got to the house. Obviously, when he got home, he was agitated, he couldn't breathe, he had just ran all the way there, and he also was not about to tell his family because they weren't going to believe him. So he just decided to lay on the ground underneath a tree and just get his breath back. So as he's laying there trying to catch his breath, trying to have a reason as to what just happened, he said he couldn't. He thought that maybe he was having a heart attack. He had no idea what was going on. He decided to turn and look at that path just to make sure that little boy was not coming down, and unfortunately that little boy was standing there. He explains how it was too much for him, and when he saw that little kid, he just fainted. When he finally wakes up, he's in his bed and his mom is next to him asking him what happened. The grandfather did tell the mom what happened, and just as he suspected, they did not believe him. The grandfather explains what happened to him was very, very real, and he believes that he bumped into the devil as a lesson because he was misbehaving. He was doing a lot of bad things. He thinks that it was a lesson to tell him, hey, if you continue to do this, I'm gonna take you with me. Honestly, we've heard of black-eyed kids, right? I've never heard of any in Mexico, but also all the stories that we've heard, they're definitely dressed. So why was that little boy naked? Was it a black-eyed kid, or was it something like completely different? But also, why were the goats scared of it? The goats were definitely scared of whatever that was. Anyway, those are just my thoughts. What do you guys think?
You often hear close encounters stories about black-eyed kids, but have you ever heard of somebody who actually let them in? Here's the story of a couple who actually let them in, what happened while they were there, and the aftermath. Paul and Brenda lived in a small town on a dirt road deep in the country. It had been snowing for several hours, and Brenda wasn't surprised when she heard a bang on her door at 2 o'clock in the morning. Living out in the sticks like they did, this happened quite often. Someone's car would break down and they would go knock on their door. As she peered out through the curtains, she noticed that her motion lights had turned on, and she could see a pair of footprints leading up to her house from the road. And there was no sign of any cars on the road in front of their home. She could, however, make out 2 figures standing at her front door. The banging continued as she woke up her husband, Paul. Paul got dressed quickly and answered the door with Brenda standing behind him. On the porch stood 2 small children, a boy and a girl, both around 8 years old. Brenda noticed that they were not dressed for winter weather, and normally her first instinct would be to rush them in the house to get them warmed up. But this time she felt a strong hesitation. There was something off about these kids. Their haircuts were strange and out of fashion. The boy had a bit of an outdated bowl cut, and the girl had long hair with short, blunt bangs. Their clothes also seemed to be unfashionable for the time, and they wouldn't make eye contact with the couple. But because it was so cold outside, they let them in anyway. Paul let them in while Brenda rushed off to the kitchen to make hot cocoa for the children. She was listening to Paul's conversation with the children while he asked them about their parents. "Our parents will be here soon," said in a bit of a sing-song voice. The girl's voice gave Brenda the creeps, even from the other room. Paul asked, "What happened? Did the car break down?" "Our parents will be here soon," she said as her and her brother sat down on the sofa across from him on his favorite chair. She heard him ask, "Was there an accident?" Again, the little girl said, "Our parents will be here soon." Brenda felt very uneasy about the kids' appearance, their behavior, their strange answers, and something else she couldn't quite figure out. As she was busy making the hot cocoa, she realized that her 3 cats were nowhere to be seen, which was odd because they normally have to chase them away from new guests. Only their 1 cat named Percival stood there and watched the children. His fur was raised along his spine, and his tail was poofed out twice his size, pointing down. He hissed at the children and stiffly walked backwards out of their sight. Walking back in with the cocoa, she noticed Paul was sitting there obviously in pain. Watch my next video for the rest of the story.
Let's talk about the black-eyed children. This is an urban legend that was really popular back in the 90s. But there were even more reports before the 90s as well. One day you might get a knock on your front door or on your car window, and when you look down, you're going to see the black-eyed children looking at you. They're going to try to make you let them in. Don't let them in. If you're one of those unlucky people that got persuaded by the black-eyed children to let them in, your death is imminent. They also appear as hitchhikers on highways. Many people report these things being demons, cryptids, some kind of human-alien hybrid. They even depict them as being ghosts too. But obviously, nobody knows for sure. The only thing that's known is once you let them in or near you, that they are dangerous. There are also sources reporting that once you let these things into your car or your house, that they shapeshift into these grotesque-looking creatures. You might be wondering what happens if you don't let them in. They get extremely angry when you don't let them in. They won't kill you if you don't let them in, but they will stalk you and harass you and try to make you go insane. If you see the black-eyed children at your door, just ignore them. Apparently, the second you start interacting with these beings, it feels like they have power over you and you're very prone to manipulation. Let me know what you guys think about the black-eyed children in the comment section below and what you want me to talk about next.
Get ready with me while I tell you about one of the creepiest true urban legends of Texas, the Black-Eyed Children of Abilene. Alright, so this story actually blew up in 1996 because of a journalist named Brian Bethel, but the people of Abilene had been whispering about this story for many years before that. So Brian's story actually happened late at night. He was sitting outside of a movie theater writing a check underneath the streetlights when two boys suddenly walked up to the door and banged on his window hard enough to startle him. At first, the boys looked normal. Outdated clothes, pale skin, but immediately something felt off to Brian. The older boy began talking in kind of a robotic, really formal voice and was saying, "Sir, can you please give us a ride? We wanted to watch a movie but left our money at home." Brian said their voices didn't match their age. They were very calm, monotone, almost as if somebody was trying to imitate human voice. That's when Brian looked closer and saw their eyes. No whites, no irises, just pure empty black. The boys seemed to sense his fear and their tone changed. Brian suddenly felt this wave of pressure as if the boys were mentally pushing him to open the door. The older boy leaned in and said, "You have to let us in," almost like an order. Brian panicked, threw his car in reverse, and drove away. But when he looked back, the boys had just vanished. They weren't running away, they weren't walking away, they were just gone. After Brian's story went public, people all over Texas, and especially in the Abilene area, started sharing their experience with these children. Along Highway 20, multiple drivers have reported seeing the same thing. A boy and a girl standing perfectly still on the side of the road, but whenever drivers pull over to help them, their eyes turn pitch black. Most of the drivers reported the same symptoms in the following days: nausea, headaches, nightmares, and an overwhelming sense of dread that lasted for days. Another woman in Abilene told a story about two kids that came and knocked on her door at 2 a.m. The kids spoke in a calm, monotone voice and kept saying the same thing, that they needed to call their mother. When the woman cracked the door open, she saw their eyes turn black and immediately slammed it shut. They stood there and continued knocking for 5 minutes and then just disappeared in an instant. In Wichita Falls, a gas station attendant said two kids came and asked to use the phone but wouldn't step into the light. Security footage caught them standing at the window, but when he looked back, they were on the other side of the parking lot, too far away to have walked at a normal speed. In Midland, Texas, on an oil field, a worker claimed to have seen two kids walking through a restricted area late at night. When he called out to them, the kids turned back to him in perfect sync and stared at him with pitch black eyes. He ran to his truck and locked the doors, and seconds later, the kids were at his windows, way too fast to have gotten there normally. There are a lot of theories about what the kids actually are. One leading theory is that maybe they're alien hybrids because their appearance, their tones, and the way that they strike fear into people lines up with a lot of extraterrestrial hybrid reports. Another is that they're demons in human form because they always seem to need to ask for permission to enter somewhere, which is very popular with demon folklore. The city of Abilene sits right next to Dyess Air Force Base, which is one of the largest Air Force bases in the country, and many people think that maybe they escaped from the base and there's some kind of a government conspiracy. Some think that they're interdimensional beings because the way that they can disappear in an instant and make people sick after they've been around them makes them think that they're linked to something that doesn't entirely belong in this world. Paranormal investigators call them fear feeders. They are something that feeds off of human fear, dread, and panic. So the real question is, what are the black-eyed children? Are they aliens? Are they demons? Are they some kind of a government conspiracy? Are they something that we don't even have a name for yet? One thing that all witnesses seem to agree on, though, is that your body knows they're there before your mind does. That cold, instinctive fear in your stomach, that's your warning. And if they ever ask to come in, just say no. Alright, so that's all that I've got for today. Let me know if you've ever heard of this story before or if you've had any kind of experiences like this, and let me know what state to do next.
Okay, so this happened in 2009, and I had either just graduated high school or I was about to. And my boyfriend was living with us at the time, and we were in our bedroom, and my mother and her boyfriend at the time would get into very loud, like angry fights. So when that would happen, we would usually leave the house when it would start getting uncomfortable. So this particular night, they were screaming at each other, and we left out the back door. So the way that our house is set up, when you walk into the front door, you're in the living room, and there's a hallway that to the left is the bedrooms, and to the right is the bathroom and the kitchen where the back door is. So while they were fighting, we snuck through the hallway and went out the back door. And we were gone for a good 45 minutes, maybe an hour. And when we walked through the door, they were staring at us like eyes wide, and they looked scared, and we're like, what's going on? Like, we had left before and come back, and it was never a big deal. And they asked us, well, how long have you been gone for? We said, I don't know, like 45 minutes, an hour maybe. And they looked even more shocked. So come to find out, they said that a few minutes before, about 15 minutes, We had apparently walked through the front door. We're giving them dirty looks. They were assuming because they were being too loud with their fight. And we looked angry, walked to the hallway into our bedroom, and slammed the door shut. And this still gives me goosebumps to this day because we were like, what the actual, what is going on? So we walked to the hallway and looked, and the bedroom door that we had left open when we left was completely shut. So I was scared, and my boyfriend at the time, of course, was scared too, but he decided to open the door. And as soon as he opened the door, it was obvious that the window was wide open, which we never left the window open. And the room was really cold. And mind you, like I said, it was around graduation time, so I remember it was really hot outside. And the AC didn't really reach my bedroom, so it was usually a little bit warm, but this night it was ice cold. And I was so freaked out that I didn't want to sleep in that bedroom that night. So we ended up sleeping in the living room. And it still freaks me out to this day because I have other stories. I grew up in New Mexico. There's a lot of, witchcraft stories I have and, S. Walker encounters, things like that. And this was the first time I had heard about, any type of doppelganger situation. But either way, super scary to this day.
Whatever you do, if you hear a knock at your door at night and it's black-eyed children, do not open that door. Actually, don't open the door for anyone late at night. So I've heard about this black-eyed children phenomenon ever since I was little, and one of my followers sent me their experience with them, and honestly, I'm in shock. So if you don't know, the black-eyed children are described as kids between like 6 to 16, and they often appear to be dressed in like old-fashioned clothing. They have completely black eyes, no whites, no irises, and it's the most captivating, most creepy feature about them. They typically approach houses or cars late at night asking to either use your phone or to come in. It's just the way that they ask is very unsettling. They demand to come in, and because they're children, it gives people the unexplainable feeling to let them in. So these kids have a very unnatural aura to them. It's very dark and their energy is so heavy. It's said that when you encounter them, you get a sense of dread, anxiety, terror. You just feel really uncomfortable. But there's something urging you to let them in. It's also said these kids could be lost souls of ghosts, vampires, spirits, or even aliens. No one really knows, but what people do know is that if you ever encounter these kids and you let them into your house or car, you're doomed. These kids have very dark intentions to you, but not physically, psychologically. So my follower Michael told me his story with them, and I'm just like chills all over my body. He told me this encounter didn't happen to him, but instead to his uncle. It's a generational story that his family passes down to everyone, and now he wants to share it with me and you guys just in case, so y'all don't end up like his uncle. Now, before I begin, everything that I'm saying is what his uncle documented before his tragic death. Michael told me this happened back in 1999, a few days before New Year's, and at the time people already thought the world was gonna end on New Year's Day, so paranoia was at an all-time high. Michael said it was December 29th, 1999 on a Wednesday. His uncle was setting up New Year's decorations all around the house because his family would be coming over in just 2 days. He said it was around 1 a.m. when his uncle heard a random knock at the door. Tired from putting up decorations for nearly 3 hours, he got down from his ladder and walked over to his window to see 3 children standing at his doorstep. He said they all had blonde hair, 2 were boys tall in height, almost twin-like, and 1 small little girl. His uncle said they had on clothes that made them look like they were from 1860 and somehow took a time machine to year 1999. Michael said his uncle laughed to himself and ended up yelling, "It's too late to be knocking on people's doors," loud enough for the kids to hear him. After he said that, his uncle heard frantic knocking at the door and the voice of the little girl saying, "Please open the door, please, please open, we need help." Confused and scared because these were children, he immediately ran over to his door, turned on the porch light, and opened the door. When the door swung open and he was looking face to face at these children, he said they were pale, their hair looked really roughed up, as well as their clothes. It was almost as if they were like rolling in mud or even just on the ground. And he said each child had pitch black eyes. He remembers his body started to shake and he got this feeling of wanting to throw up. He remembers the girl pointing to the inside of the house and asking, "Can we come in?" Now keep in mind this little girl didn't look at him once, just straightforward, no smile, nothing. Same with the boys, and his uncle said that it was like they were looking through him, not at him. Michael's uncle said he had the urge to slam the door in their face, but something about them, something about their energy, made him keep that door open. So he ends up saying, "What do you guys want? Where are your parents?" One of the tall boys ended up talking and he said, "Please let us in. They're coming. We need to go inside." The other boy beside him then said, "Just give us the okay to come in. Please let us in." After he heard the words, "They're coming," he immediately told the children to come inside, completely ignoring the fact that not only did they have these pitch black, weird alien eyes, but something like his instincts were even telling him not to let them in, but he still decided to. Michael said what happened next shocked him and his family when they read over these documented diaries. His uncle said that when the kids entered the house, the lights ended up flickering on and off one time, and then they all sat on the couch staring at the turned off TV. He said he started to get a feeling of dread and unhappiness. His eyes felt heavy and he had the urge to go upstairs and sleep, which he ended up doing. He said he remembers telling the kids to make themselves at home and that he was going to bed. And then as he was walking to his room, he started to hear chuckling and then it just went blank. His uncle said when he woke up, he walked into the living room only to find the kids left. There was no trace of them, nothing. It was like a fever dream. He thought that was it and he did his good deed before the year ended, but things ended up getting a lot worse. His uncle documented how that whole entire day he started to have hallucinations of the children. He was seeing them everywhere and they would tell him to do things. Bad things that his own body and mind would force him to do, but after it was done, the kids, they would disappear again. He kept hearing laughter, his vision was acting up, and the world that he once saw was now different and dark. It was driving him to insanity. Michael said his uncle did end up reaching out to his family about this, but they did not believe him at all. Michael said his uncle probably could not handle this crazy hallucinations that were happening to him and probably really just wanted it all to stop but didn't know how, because he ended up writing these diaries explaining what he was seeing, and after he offed himself. Michael said after investigation, there were no DNA of these kids, not even when they sat on the couch. The only evidence of these children is what his uncle wrote. Now, Michael said his uncle never suffered with anything. He was not depressed. So this was very, very shocking news when his family got the call about it. But now his family never opens the door for anyone at night, and these diaries are kept as a reminder.
The truth behind the black-eyed people sighting in Illinois. So these black-eyed people are mainly seen to be children who appear at night asking to be let inside. Not for money, not for help, but just to be let in. So their skin has been reported to be pale, their voice is calm, but their eyes are completely black. No whites, no iris, just darkness staring back at you. And according to the legend confirmed by Snopes and Lurking.world, these black-eyed children are often teenagers or kids who appear at night asking to enter homes or cars. In one account, a woman in Illinois heard a knock at her door late at night. She opened the door because they were kids. Two children stood there, motionless, pale. And then she saw their eyes. They were black, empty, soulless. Right away, her spirit knew that something was not right. And some say it's a legend, but so many people have witnessed these black-eyed children. But could this be what the Bible calls spiritual warfare? In Ephesians 6:12 it says, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against the principalities, against the powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world." These children or beings ask for permission to enter, just like demons need permission to enter your life. They disguise themselves as innocent, but bring darkness. But here's the truth that fear doesn't want you to know. Demons flee at the name of Jesus. Darkness cannot remain where the light lives. Whether these sightings are real or not, they point to something that is true. Evil will always disguise itself as harmless, and only the Spirit of God can reveal what's actually real. So don't fear the knock at the door. Fear the open door in your heart. Walk with Jesus. because that door will stay sealed by his blood. So the woman from Illinois who reportedly heard the children ask to use the phone, seeing their eyes, she immediately refused and shut the door. Some witnesses lock doors, turn on their lights, and avoid windows to make sure that the children would leave. They often describe this feeling that was lingering, this sense of dread, even after the children leave. It's a heavy, oppressive feeling. And many people tell their friends or family about these encounters. Some people post on paranormal forums or submit stories to audio sites or urban legend websites like the one from Illinois. But there's rarely any official reportings to authorities because it's so surreal and most people fear being dismissed.
This is one of the creepiest things that you'll ever hear, guaranteed. It's about the Black-Eyed Kids, and I want to thank David Weatherly. We actually interviewed him about 10 years ago about this really creepy phenomenon known as the Black-Eyed Kids. Here's one of the scenarios. So you're at home, you're all alone, and it's maybe 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and all of a sudden there's a knock on your door, and you open the door, and there are these two kids, but their heads are down like this. That's why I'm wearing the baseball cap. And you go, "Hi, can I help you?" And they pick up their heads, and all of a sudden you look at their eyes, and not like mine, they're completely black, but they're children. And they'll say something like, "Is it food time yet? Can we come in? This won't take long." I mean, it's really creepy. Usually, the person who goes to the door is completely overcome with fear. I mean, the fear is visceral. It's overwhelming because most people have never experienced anything like this. I don't want to experience a black-eyed kid. They slam the door, they go running upstairs, they peer out the window, and here's the deal. They look down, the kids are gone. We hear this over and over and over again. It's terrifying. Black-eyed kids, folks, it's real. What do I think they are? I believe that, first of all, they're not children. They're stunted. They look like kids because their growth is stunted. I believe that they are the product of fallen angels and the seed of the woman. So you got fallen angels here, the women are taken, they're abducted, and they're impregnated, and 3 months after that, they're re-abducted and the baby is taken from them. But they're not quite human. They don't grow to, let's say, what would be normal to us. So they're stunted. That's my opinion. That's what I think the Black-Eyed Kids are. And David Weberly also believed that. Thanks for watching. Appreciate it.
This story comes out of Phoenix. Now, there was this older couple who lived near Scottsdale, and they said that one night they were sitting in their living room watching a movie. They said there was a really bad thunderstorm out, and they just remembered hearing the rain hit the roof of the house. Well, all of a sudden, they start hearing a knock at the door. And they thought, like, that's odd. Like, who would be here this late at night during a thunderstorm? But they were the kind of people who would open the door for anyone, and they would help out anybody in need. So the old man, he goes and he answers the door. And when he opens the door, the older woman feels like a strange breeze kind of blowing, which she just assumed was from the storm. They both see these two men standing at the front door. They are wearing black suits and ties, and they look just very out of place. And one thing they noticed is that there wasn't any white in their eyes. It was just all black. And they said, yeah, can we help you? Like, what are you doing here late at night? They said, excuse us, our car broke down, and we need to use your phone to call someone. Can we come inside? And like I said, them being just sort of this generous old couple, they were like, okay, you can use the phone. Like, yeah, come on in. So these two men walk through the door, and the old lady notices that they were walking like very funny, kind of erratically, as if they had never walked before, and they were trying to figure out like how to walk and how to move their body. They go over to the couch, they sit down, and she says to them, can I get you guys something to drink or something to eat? And they said, no, we're fine. We just need to use the phone. So she said, well, the phone is down this hallway, and it's on the wall. So the one guy got up and he goes to use the phone. The other guy sitting on the couch, they noticed he kept like grabbing his face, like something was wrong with it. And he seemed very irritated, very bothered by something. Well, the old woman decided to go in the kitchen and grab herself some tea. When she walks in the kitchen, she notices the one man who had went to use the phone standing in the hallway, just staring straight ahead. And she's like, are you all right? Like, is everything okay? She said he didn't say anything. She's like, excuse me, sir, are you okay? And she said, then it was like all of a sudden he realized what was going on. He's like, oh, yes, I'm fine. I just used the phone. Our ride will be here soon. So then he walked down the hallway and he sat back on the couch. Well, the old woman, she started feeling really, really sick. And she felt like she was getting nauseous, and she sat down in the kitchen. Her husband, who's sitting out talking to them, right, he starts feeling kind of nauseous. He starts feeling kind of sick. And that's when these two men said, our ride will be here soon, and then we will be gone. So the old man gets up and he goes into the kitchen. He tells his wife, like, something's wrong. Like, I'm not feeling good. And I think I'm getting sick. And the wife says, I don't feel good either. Like, yeah, something is off. They go back out into the living room. The two men are gone. They're nowhere in the house. But the odd thing was the door was locked from the inside. So how could they have gone out the door and managed to lock it? Because they didn't have a key. They look outside. They look all around. These people are nowhere to be found. They assumed, they must have got a ride and left. Well, over the next couple of months, they had this strange illness, and they kept getting sicker and sicker. Eventually, the old man passed away, and they could never really explain what was wrong with him, what this illness was. But his wife believed it had something to do with that encounter with these two men.
Here's a story time of when my friend and I in high school were driving around, and I looked out the passenger window at the people in the car beside us, as you do at a stoplight, right? It was like night. It was like not late, but it was dark, and I looked, and they were already looking at me, and both of the people in the car had black eyes. There was no pupil. It was just pure solid black, and they were just like this. And so then I turned to my friend and I said, hey, do you see that these people have solid black eyes? And my friend was like, oh, yeah, they do. So then we floored it through the light, and they were behind us for maybe 3 seconds. And there was nowhere to turn, right? There was nowhere that they would have turned to in that time. But by the time that we had moved that much from the light, the car was gone. The car was gone.
Okay, so this, I swear, is true. It actually just happened 2 days ago. A friend of mine, one of my dear, dear friends, messaged me. It was like 10:45 at night. He was super freaked out. He had been drifting off to sleep, and there was a knock on his door, which was very strange to him because he has a doorbell. So he ignored it, and then he heard another knock. And he looked at the cameras that were on the front door, and nobody was there, so he ignored it again. And then someone knocked again, so he went and answered the door, which I would have never done. And there were 2 children standing out there, and they never looked up, but they asked him to come in. They said that they were extremely cold, and they said, we must come in. And he was really disturbed by what they had on. They had on these odd outfits, like oversized hoodies and weird shoes. And they had these strange robotic voices, and he was just really disturbed. So he didn't let them in, and said, I'm going to call the cops so your parents can come pick you up. And they kept on saying, you have to let us in, you have to let us in. So he said, I'm going to call the cops. He closed the door. And he looks at the footage, and during that whole time, there was nobody out there. So he was really convinced that he was losing his mind, and super freaked out, rightfully so. So I Googled some stuff, and the Black-Eyed Children came up immediately. I vaguely remember hearing about them, but of course they're an urban legend, so I didn't pay attention. Why would I? And they didn't ever look up at him, so he doesn't know if they had black eyes, but I sent him the stuff. I was like, is this what you experienced? And he was so shaken up. He was like, holy shit, down to even what they said. This is exactly what I experienced. And I know it sounds like a lie because it's a urban legend, but it really happened. It didn't happen to a friend of a friend's sister's cousin. It happened to my really dear friend, and I was speaking to him right afterwards. I mean, he's still really, really shaken up. So for whatever it's worth, I do think these things are real, and supposedly they are very, very, they're malicious. They're not benevolent.
So if you encounter anything like this, supposedly they'll come up to doors, they'll come up to people at like gas stations, they'll knock on the window of your car. I guess if you encounter these things, don't interact with them, and certainly don't let them in. But I promise this is true. It really actually happened to my friend. So be safe.
You guys asked for more black-eyed children stories, so here we go. This one time, early 2010, I was walking home from work and found myself escorting a young lady to her car. She asked me to escort her, and hoping I'd talk her into a drink or two, I had already had a few myself, I'd get a number or possibly get laid that night. I'm not gonna lie, she was kinda hot. No shit though, she looked scared. I kept walking with her and was trying to at least coax her out of what she was worried about. She would only comment about some really creepy looking kids who were following her. Being we were in the downtown Seattle area, this could amount to anything. So we kept walking and talking. I kept looking behind us to see if the little fuckers were in tow. Nothing popped up out of the ordinary. Then she grabs my arm really hard and whispered, "That's them." They were about half a block in front of us, just standing there looking at her. So I do the prudent thing to do, which was cross the street. I made sure I locked eyes with the big one, and I keep in mind once I get the lady to her car that I'd give them an earful about being a couple of little shits for scaring a lone woman in a metropolitan area. I didn't get scared or anything, but did notice something strange. They didn't break eye contact with me. Mind you, I don't look like the kind of guy you want to fuck with. Honestly, it's just a front since I'm a bit shy. My look reminds people of either a skinhead or a club bouncer. The black tanker boots and Van Dyke mixed with the above don't make me look like a people person either. People break eye contact with me constantly. These two kids didn't. That was a red flag for me. I finally got the woman to her car. She said thanks. I made sure to tell her where the local police station was at. That's how that one ended, but I have another story. I helped them once. Never ever under any circumstance do it. I'm not sure what to do, but it feels as if they are ripping your soul out. They get really close to you and you get amazingly drowsy. If it weren't for my girlfriend showing up mid-invasion and kicking them out, I probably would be dead. I didn't even see the black eyes until I had let them in. They're getting smarter. Oh my gosh, no.